Hello everyone. What kinds of preserved foods do you often eat? For example, I eat umeboshi every day. Please look at this picture I found on the internet. There are very old umeboshi in this box. I hear that they were pickled in 1576. I was very surprised to know that. Then I became interested in preserved foods. A long time ago, it was difficult to get enough food in all seasons of the year. So, people tried to preserve foods, and they found some effective ways to do so. These became traditional knowledge. Maybe you know these two ways, drying and salting. Many kinds of fruits are preserved by drying. Some kinds of vegetables are preserved by salting. Do you know why these two ways are effective to preserve foods? Let's think about the things that happen to foods when they spoil. Some kinds of microorganisms propagate in foods and make them bad. Microorganisms need water to propagate. So, we can understand drying is effective to preserve foods. Let's think about salting next. If we salt vegetables, the water in them comes out. And some kinds of microorganisms cannot easily use the water in salted foods to propagate. Maybe a long time ago, people didn't know about microorganisms, but they found these ways of preserving foods and they became traditional knowledge. Traditional knowledge can be explained with science, and that is very interesting for me. Now, there are many kinds of technologies to keep fresh foods. However, we still use preserved foods to cook some dishes. Why? We will see some of the reasons by understanding some differences between preserved foods and fresh foods. For example, there are some interesting differences between dried shiitake mushrooms and fresh shiitake mushrooms. Please look at the graph. We can see that the vitamin D in dried shiitake mushrooms that are boiled is more than the vitamin D in fresh shiitake mushrooms. I also hear that dried shiitake mushrooms include more umami compounds than fresh shiitake mushrooms. I also found information about fish and meat. Fish and meat are preserved by drying and salting. I think they are delicious. Preserved foods have some good points that fresh foods don't have. So, we still enjoy eating preserved foods although it is not difficult for us to have fresh foods. Now we know that drying and salting are traditional ways to preserve foods. Do you know about freeze drying? It is one of the ways of drying. Some foods preserved by freeze drying are taken to space as foods for astronauts. For example, rice cakes preserved by freeze drying. A rice cake is mochi in Japanese. In space, astronauts can eat these rice cakes after adding water to them. Freeze drying is one of the many technologies astronauts need to live in space. I think this is very interesting. Thank you for listening.